Hello, hello. Welcome to a live stream. If you're watching this in the future, we do this every 2 weeks and it's a Q&A session primarily, but if there's no questions, then I will build out a tool in the meantime. I'm starting up a little bit early, actually right on time at 4 p.m. But if you want to catch the next one, it's at 4 p.m. in 2 weeks. I'll give it a few minutes to let people jump in here, see if there's any questions or anything going on. So if you're watching this in the future, then you might want to skip ahead a couple minutes. I'm just going to kill some time, let people jump in. But yeah, welcome to the live stream. I hope if you're watching this live that you're doing well, that it's nice and sunny and beautiful wherever you're at. I'm doing pretty well here. But yeah, I'm excited. We got some cool use cases. I've been playing around with Zapier a little bit. So we might check out some of those. I know I have a Slack use case that I'll be showing you guys. And we might look at some of the other features that they got going on. So we'll be doing that in this live stream. Probably going to connect it with a webhook to a Flask application, if I had to guess, inside of a WayScript layer. Zapier. But like I said, we'll give it a few minutes, let people jump in if they're gonna join. Let me message our Discord community. I almost forgot. If you want to join this Discord, the link is in the description as well. Let me grab the link here. Cool. Yeah, so if you want to join this Discord community and receive those notifications whenever I go live, of course, you can always subscribe to the channel, but the link for that Discord is in the description as well. So I think we're all set up. I think we're good to go here. Yeah, I think we're good to go. All right, so let's get started. We gave it a few minutes. So what I want to build in this one is a Flask application that connects with the webhook to a Zapier integration. So I will pull that Zapier integration over here to show you what those look like. So I've already built one. I can show you. So what this is doing is we can connect to a service on Zapier, and with that service, we can use it as a trigger. This trigger can fire an event or an action, as they call it on Zapier, and that action can be a webhook. So in this one, you see that I have a webhook that's connected to a WayScript URL. So using that endpoint, what I can do is take out that JSON from this trigger event and do something with it. I'm not doing anything too fancy with that information at the moment, but maybe it'll get fancy in this live stream. I'm not sure. So let's get started creating something like that. Now, our first step is to create an endpoint. We can do that using a Flask app. There's a bunch of different ways we can do this, but I will use Flask for this example. Sorry, I'm recovering from getting sick. So in this Flask app, what we need, we'll go and get some default starter code. And we will build out from there. So I always go and grab it from our docs. I should probably build something a little bit better. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's WayScript Viz. So that's a good point. If you're watching this channel and you have seen a lot of WayScript Viz tutorials, we have moved on to new software trying to find these docs. There we go. Called WayScript X. So WayScript X is more powerful, in my opinion. We'll go and grab some code here where we're going to host a Flask application. A little small. All right, much better. All right, so we're hosting a simple Flask app here. If we're going to use a webhook to communicate with our Flask app, then that means we'll need to import requests from Flask. And what that gives us is the ability to look at requests coming to our Flask app. So that means, say, whenever Zapier sends a webhook to us, I now have too many pages open. So whenever Zapier sends a JSON post request to us, that import will allow us to interact and get that information out of it. So now that we have that, I believe we should be good for the most part. We might have to import something more later on. So now let's create a endpoint. With this endpoint, we're expecting some type of post request to go to it. So we will need to establish that. Let's say start process as our endpoint. We will need to make sure that our methods accept a post request. So I always mess that bit of code up, so I will make sure I go and copy it. Yeah, there we go. So I will also put get here too. That way we can just view it. But we'll make sure that we're accepting a post. Let me zoom out. Way too visible. All right. So we're accepting our post request. And now at this point, what we need is we will change our function. We will say Slack Zapier. And now we'll say something like if request.method. So our request object has a attribute of method equals post. Then we can do some type of logic. If we want to get the data from a webhook that is being sent to WayScript, we can say some variable request will denote that we want it in a JSON format, and we can get whatever information we want using this method. So now that we have all of that, let's just put something default in. We'll put data, and we will return something simple. Let's just return an JSON response. We'll say message and success. We'll put that inside of our if statement. All right. So this little bit of code here, what we're saying is we're expecting a post request to go to this endpoint. And when we get it, we're going to pull out information from that request and return message success. All right, so this is a very simple Flask application, and we can deploy it in WayScript X very simply by clicking on deploy. And I will go and copy a little bit more code. I've learned the more I copy, the less mistakes I make. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe it's just a reality and it's not a good thing or a bad thing. All right, so command to run will be this Flask run. We'll establish a port and a host, and we will say the same port that we're putting here. So now with all of that, I believe we have everything set up. Oh, actually, let's do a best practice, and we'll say requirements.txt, and we'll put Flask. Perfect. So going back to that .triggers file, what this file is doing, if you're brand new to WayScript, is we're creating events that whenever that event is triggered, we're doing some type of command or action. In this specific scenario, we have a deploy trigger, and the event that triggers the command to run is a user going to the URL. Since this is a Flask server, it will look at the routes in my Flask app. So with all of that, we will click test, and this will stand this up. We'll give it just a second, and we'll go to it. So right now we should expect an error because we're not actually doing anything with a GET request. So let's change that. So if request method equals post, and then if it doesn't, we'll say return message GET request success. All right, so we will deploy that again. My mistake. I forget that we're live. Oh, I see. I'm opening up the comments for the first time. Let's see if I can ban people. Put user in timeout. That seems kind of powerful. Hide user. Sorry, I missed your message. Are you retiring WayScript Viz? No, at the moment it's not being retired, but you know, that's above me a little bit. I don't know what the exact game plan for it is, but it wouldn't surprise me if someday it was just WayScript X. But I'm not sure. That's something I would have to be told rather than make decisions on it. All right. So now, sorry about the chat. So now that all of that is taken care of, let's deploy this again. Yeah, my apologies for getting that I'm live. I get zoned in sometimes. All right, so let's see. We'll click test. We'll stand this up. We'll make sure it's running. We can verify that it is running by going to our process tab. And in this process tab, we can click on the status. We see our deploy trigger is running, and it looks like everything is good. So back to our terminal. At this point, we can go to this endpoint. And our endpoint specifically is start process. Start process. All right. So at that URL, at that endpoint, that is very small. Let me zoom in as much as I can. We get back the JSON response that we put in to our Flask application. So we've stood up our Flask endpoint, and at this point we need to connect to Zapier triggers to begin firing events. That way we can do something with them. We will close that page. I will pull over Zapier. If I still have that page open, I may not. Let's open it up again. Every time I say Zapier now, there's a catchphrase that is at the bottom of their site. I don't know if it's on this page. Yeah, Zapier makes you happier. So I know I'm saying it wrong. Zapier makes you happier. So it messes with me every time. Zapier. Let's pull open Zapier. And we'll create a zap in their terminology. So create zap. I still need WayScript Viz to start things out. I guess because I'm visual still. However, if the entire visual experience spat out a code would be nice, for sure. I think that's a functionality that was in the pipeline. I'm not sure if it ever happened, but I believe there is a way to export Viz programs. I don't know if it's admin only or not. It's been a minute since I've been on WayScript Viz. Let's pull it up. Yeah, but I do agree. I think it, to my understanding, it definitely wouldn't be a surprise. It would be something that we would communicate very well if we were going to retire it soon. But for the immediate future, I believe it's still good to go. I believe it's still fine. It's it's still a cool product for sure. It's just not something that we're actively putting too many resources into, is all. So let's see. We're creating a webhook here. Let's play with something cool. I was just going to do Slack. We'll do Slack to begin with, but we might come back and choose something else that's more interesting. So in the Zapier interface, they have tons of different integrations that we can use as triggers. We will choose a Slack trigger, and let's say new public message posted anywhere. That seems cool. We'll click on continue. We'll choose a Slack account. We'll choose my personal one. That way I don't make anyone in my team mad that I'm using the work one. Trigger for bot messages, no. We'll click on continue. All right. So looks like we have successfully connected that. So now that we have our trigger set up, we need to connect Zapier to WayScript. We can do that with their webhooks by Zapier. We'll choose an event, and let's make this the post event. That way it's working with our method, with our logic that we're creating here for post. Let me make this page a little bit smaller. That way I can make sure I catch everything in chat. Maybe I can pop this out. Ooh, perfect. Apologies. I'm technologically inefficient right now. Like if I had a guide to get the ideas going, it would be nice. Yeah, it would be cool to make a guide that goes from Viz to WayScript X to like show how you would take a Viz program and make it into a WayScript X program. That would be a pretty neat little video tutorial series. And it's probably something we need to do anyways, to be honest, because we have a lot of content on the channel that if WayScript Viz ever did cease to exist, then all that content would be almost obsolete. So it would be cool if someone had it would be very cool to create like a little guide that shows if your WayScript Viz program does this, then WayScript X, it will look like this, and just do it like module by module on a web page. That would be kind of neat. Maybe that's in the future. I don't know. It would be a cool project for sure. All right, so now we have our post request. So we're sending a request to a site using Zapier. The URL for this will be our WayScript hosted one. So we will move this over for now. We'll go and get that URL, that endpoint. It is our base plus start process. Start process. Okay. Now, there's different ways that we can interact using a post request. Depending on the option that you choose here, determines how the data will be sent to the endpoint. So forms are okay. Raw text is probably fine. XML is fine. The most common way that I've seen and I would suggest would be to use a JSON format. It's just the easiest to read in Flask applications. We'll leave our data blank. By leaving this blank, what it does is gives us all the information from the previous step. We'll say no basic auth. Okay. So at this point, if we were to go, I don't know how to demonstrate this. Let's see if I can. So if I open an incognito browser that is not logged in to my WayScript account, what was it? Start process. Yeah, so if I open a incognito window, which means I'm logged out of WayScript, whenever I go to that endpoint, I get prompted to log in. If I log in with someone that doesn't have credentials to see that endpoint, then I'll get back an error. I believe it's a 500 right now, and that will likely change in the future to be something a little bit more polished. But all that is to say that the endpoints we create on WayScript are protected, and how we can access those from third-party applications. Oh no, I lost my pop-out window. There we go. Or import WayScript viz within WayScript X. I'm trying to follow along the best I can. Yeah, you can actually do that. Of course, you wouldn't be able to do it if WayScript viz didn't exist, but I can show you that very briefly. We'll come back to this. Well, actually, let's finish this off very quickly because we're almost done, just in case anyone watches this back in the future. So, to take care of that authentication, our last step to get this working will be going and grabbing a key, application key. We'll copy this. So, in our header, we just have a authorization, and this works as a bearer token, and we'll put in that key. Test and continue. And you see that we get a different message. We don't get the get request message. Let's move this over. Zapier Livestream. So you see that we get back message success. And over here, when we tested out our webhook, that's exactly what we get back. So now you could do all sorts of different stuff with this webhook, and you would put all that code right here. So awesome code. That's a good stopping point. If there's any ideas that anyone gets along the way, we can come back to this. I do want to show how we can do this. So WayScript viz run. Okay, so let's say, I'm not trying to derail you, Derek. Glad to see you back. Oh, no worries. I do appreciate the questions. It's it's definitely a lot better to have questions on like how to do stuff than just sit here and talk to myself for like an hour. So I definitely appreciate you being here. You're not derailing me at all. So within WayScript viz, oh man, it's been a minute. I gotta sign in. Wow. It's almost like a fossil at this point to me because it's been so long. All right, so let's build a little simple my script v live stream. All right, cool. So let's I wonder what I have connected. Slack. I do have it connected. Okay, cool. So let's say activated from WayScript X. And I think that's all we need. So there's a couple of different ways we can do this. There's a manual way and there's more of a programmatic way. The manual way in Viz is if we just create an HTTP trigger on the top of it, then we can run whatever program we want from WayScript X. So we have this URL, and whenever a user goes to it, then it fires off our program. That's one way we can do it, and it's probably not the way I would suggest if your application wasn't anything just for like hobby level stuff. So in WayScript X, what we can do is say triggers, new file, cron trigger, and then we just need a curl request, sample curl. We can do it with Python too, but I'm pretty sure I'm not very good with bash commands. It would just look like that. But in Python, what we could do, we could say execute.py. Say we had a bunch of different programs we wanted to run. We could do something like this. Equals requests.get and go to that URL. And that will fire it with our trigger if we said something like Python execute.py. So this is one way. It's not the best way. Let's look at the other way that we can do this. We'll use the we'll say sample.py. Keep it simple. So WayScript viz. Let's go and look at those docs. But there is a SDK that we can use for this. Let's find it. So within here, I need just a second to find it. Here we go. I believe it's this. Hmm. 2 seconds. There is a way that we can call WayScript to execute our stuff. I believe it's just been a minute. Apologies. Libraries, logic modules. I just need to find it. It's been quite a minute. So I believe it used to live here, but it looks like this has been updated to WayScript viz, which is fine. Let's it's definitely in the docs, but let's play around with it for a second. So import WayScript. I believe there's a Python method, Python view methods. Yeah, I think we can do something that looks like this. But I'm not sure how this is going to go, because I'm not sure where this lives anymore, because this is probably the library for WayScript X. Print Python sample.py. Not what we want. Aha. Look at that. I found something we can use. So looks like I wrote this over a year ago. So let's hope it still works. So there's our import. So here's our import from WayScript. Import WayScript. We will create our client using that import. And I believe now what we can do is we can just say WayScript.run and then the program ID. The program ID on WayScript Viz lives where'd it go? Man, I have way too many pages open. There we go. So the program ID on WayScript Viz lives at the endpoint. So 79055. We will run that. And let's see if it works. So now that we have this set up, we can say python sample.py. Okay, let's pip install WayScript. All right, now let's try this again. Yeah, so we may have deappreciated this. I will have to follow up on this because I'm not 100% certain. Let's see if it still exists in PyPy. Yeah, it looks like it may have been overridden. That kind of stinks. Bummer. So I guess the only way to do this then will be that I know about. I will have to follow up on this, but the only way that I would know about it for sure is to create that HTTP trigger on the top of it like that and send the request. I know that's not a very good solution. I figured we still had the I don't know why we would take that down. We probably didn't. I'm probably just not accessing it correctly. It probably got renamed and I'm having a hard time finding it. Wait a minute. I can pip install WayScript? Yeah, you can. It's going to give you the X version at the moment. So it's pretty handy. It does a lot of cool things, and I can show you some of those. So this is the old format. I guess we got rid of that, or it lives somewhere else. But if you go to the WayScript X docs, there's an SDK section on the left, and from here there's a lot of cool stuff you can do using the WayScript import. So let's go back to that previous example. Zapier Livestream, save all. So if we import WayScript, then we get this context, and we get a lot of cool stuff that we can do with it. So this gives us identity to our Flask application, and we can view some of those attributes. So instead of, let's say when we just send a regular request to our endpoint, instead of message success, let's return string. We'll do context dot get, and I'm just pulling these from the SDK. We'll say get let's do this one, get workspace. Okay. So now let's add an environment variable to this. We'll say Flask env. This will make it so each time we make a change to our Flask app, we don't have to redeploy it. We'll save that. We will deploy it this first time, so it gets that environment variable. And now let's go back to it. We'll copy that. Start process. Looks like it's not up yet. What's the problem? Not sure. Let's move this out. Oh, I didn't cast on my type all the way. Okay. We'll refresh. I think it's having a hard time because I tried to deploy something that isn't deployable. Give it just a second. Ooh, I get to have more power. Put user in timeout. Cool. Very powerful. Okay. Back to this. Still no luck. We might have to redo this. I think I messed up by not casting that type correctly. Aha. There we go. We'll deploy this. We'll make sure it deploys in our process tab. Running. Okay, we'll assume that it's running. And now let's go to that page. So I will refresh. And at our endpoint, we get this. So let me zoom out. Oh, wow. That's a lot of information. I was not expecting context to be that large. But I guess more information the better. It does look like hieroglyphics on this page right here, but this is not how you would interact with this in reality. So let's see if there's a field that we can pull out. Yeah, I'm just going to copy all of this and we're going to put this in a file. Copy. That way I can look at it a little bit better. So workspace.json. Yes. Wait, how did I not know this? Oh, it's pretty new. It's pretty new. It's one of our newest features. We included this in, oh, it's going to give it to me on one line. Okay. Let's just pull out the first thing. All right, let's pull out. We'll get message, created date. Just so we can work with it. All right, so our context, we will say info equals, oh, I'm converting it to a string. That's why it's not. Context.get workspace. And from there, we will say return value equals info.get message.get created date, I think. Yeah, I think it's created underscore date. And we will return that value. Let's try this again. Triggers, copy, start process. None type object has no attribute get. What's going wrong? Context.getWorkspace.json. All right. Info.get message. Let's try this again. Apologies for what's going on. Test. We'll deploy this again. Process is up and running. Okay. In our app, we're saying if we send a GET request, we want the context of the workspace. We're getting the workspace information. And there's no message. Probably. Let's just return the same thing that we were doing before. But yeah, not the cleanest presentation of this. I do apologize, but the WayScript SDK allows us to get information about the workspace or the user accessing that workspace. So pulling that up again. All right, now I have it up next to me. So info, we will get our message, and inside of that message, let's get created date. Okay. None type object has no attribute get. Info, assigning info, context, value, info, message. Let's try that. I'm sure I'm just doing something kind of strange here. Message. Yeah. So we can go on with this example, but there's probably not too much more I can show with it. But yeah, we can return workspace information. I will go and take a WayScript docs example so we can get user information from it. WayScript X docs. So in the SDK, I will take a little bit of code from it, identify requester. We will take all of this. Actually, let's just take, we'll make this our home page, just like how it is here. So using that in our app, we will make that our home page. And I think that's all we need. So if we go to that URL, yeah, we get my information. So we can identify different people depending on who accesses our application, which is pretty cool because then we can do stuff like, let's take a look at this. One JSON and we have email. So let's say, let me zoom out. Let's say that if user.get email equals and then we will return so pretty cool, because now we can make very custom pages depending on the user who accesses it. Hey man, how's it going? Pretty good. Hope you're doing well, man. Instead of numbers, we're getting random words for a subdomain. Is your indents wrong? Potentially. I kind of gave up on that example. Info, get workspace. We can take a look at it. So start process, we can debug a little bit. Just a huge amount of information. All right, so this is what I'm looking at. Let's just pull out something simple. So message created date. This looks like a JSON to me, but it might not be. I don't know how that's getting returned. So start process, info, context get workspace. Let's just do, let's do this. Let's do type info. And it should give back an error if it is JSON, because I don't think you can cast or get type like that. Object of type is not JSON serializable. I don't know how we're getting this back. I don't know what context this, what type this information is. I figured it would be JSON, but I guess it's not. Yeah, so probably not going to be the cleanest to work with. Maybe I can just do value equals info.json. And then return value. I feel like I'm overlooking something very simple. That's a dictionary. Yeah, so it would take a little bit of work. But I will have a clean example on how to do that next time. I guess we could just JSON dump it, but no point going down that road. So we'll keep it as a dictionary for now. But yeah, so probably got time for one more example here, 10 minutes or so. So if there's anything that anyone wants to see, let me know. If not, I'll probably play around with this, getting user-specific information, and do something with it. New folder, templates. We will create a sample HTML file. So new file, sample.html. H1 awesome. Let me zoom in. Awesome HTML template. Cool. So in our app, always a struggle on if it's too big or too small. All right, so we have a sample template over here, sample.html. Let's say for Derek. And in our app.py, let's import one more thing. We'll call render template from Flask. And with this render template, what we can do is we will say return render template, and we will render sample.html. Let's make sure that we get that. Refresh. Awesome HTML template for Derek. Perfect. So now let's expand this a little bit. Let's say new file base.html. And what I want to do here is, let's say that I have some base HTML that will always be the same no matter the user who views it. But if another user goes and views it, then I want specific information for that user to show up on the page. We can do that either by rendering a whole different HTML page, or we can pass arguments to a base.html to do it. So this will get a little involved here, I think. So let's see if I can pull up a little bit of Flask code already made. Ooh. Yeah, so let's take this in our base.html. We'll get rid of oh, that's not actually what we need. This is what we need, I think. All right, so doc. So what this is, our base file, will just be something very basic. I'm just trying to show you. I'll get rid of that tag 2. We'll create a body tag and get rid of this. So this would be what we would want every user who sees the page to see. So we could say something like important information for every user, and every user will see this. Now in our sample.html, we will want to extend that. So extends base.html. We have block content and end block. I think that's all we need. I'm taking that from a -1 example on Stack Overflow, so it's probably not going to work. But if it doesn't, we can fix it pretty quickly, I think. Opening up another example here. But what I want to do is I want to show how we can pass information from our back end to our front end. So let's say now in our app.py that we're creating this information using the WayScript library. We're getting it and we're pulling out the user's email. Now, when we render the template, what we can do is we can say something like email equals user.get email. We'll actually make this a variable to make this a little bit cleaner. Email equals user.get email. So now we'll create a Flask variable of email, and when we render this template, we're passing information that is in a variable of email that is our value of email. We'll change it because that didn't sound very understandable. So we'll pass to Flask a variable that is email that contains our user email. So in our sample, I believe it's double curly brackets, and we can put email. We'll save all of this, and I will be extremely surprised if this works in the first try. Yeah, so it did. So we'll put a break here to make it a little bit. Cool. So all of that was a little convoluted, but just to try to explain it all again, what I'm doing here is I'm creating an endpoint. So when a user accesses it, I can get information about the user and do something specific depending on the user. So in this example, I'm accessing the endpoint, and when I access it, I'm rendering a template that we can dynamically create depending on the user. So the user that goes to it will see unique content only to them. And the information we pass back is the user's email. So this every user would see. And depending on the user who accesses your endpoint, they would see this. So the idea is that you could create very dynamic websites with Flask, and depending on information about the user, you could render certain things to certain people. This gets way more involved if we start thinking about user groups. So let's say I'm in a group. Let's see if I am. Settings, groups. I'm not. So let's put myself in one. Management. Excuse me. Zapier Livestream. So if user.get group, actually let's say if management in user.get groups. Actually, let's just return the full thing. That way we can see what we're working with. So return render template, email. We'll just put in the JSON here. User. So if true, this is bad. Don't do this. And we will refresh. Cool. So now at my endpoint, I'm just seeing this information. So groups is a list that has the name field in it. So we need if management in user.get groups. It's a list. It's our first entry in the list. .get name. Then we will say email equals user in management group. All right, so let's see if this works. Perfect. So let's make sure there's no questions. It's a good size. Yeah, so to explain all this, I know this is pretty deep into a very specific topic here, but essentially what this allows me to do is I can create dynamic content depending on the groups that a user is in. So since this user is in a group called management, since I'm in a group called management, then I can return certain content depending on that user's groups. So if you get thinking about how powerful this is, it gets pretty involved if you start thinking about things like modules of React apps or even Flask apps to an extent. Flask is pretty bare bones. But if you start creating a Flask app, or sorry, a React app, where you can have different compartments and different interactive modules depending on the user's groups, it gets pretty cool, pretty quick, I think. And that's definitely something that I would love to create, because then if you could essentially build one of the most dynamic dashboards possible by doing it this way. So I'm excited. I'm excited about this feature. I know I went way into a rabbit hole on this one, but it is pretty cool. So you could even, if there's multiple groups that a user is in, or certain combinations of groups, you could give dynamic views depending on that. All sorts of cool stuff you can do with this. It's neat that a user, depending on their groups, can get unique content. It's almost like replacing PHP with Python. Yeah. Yeah, it's Flask is not Flask like this is not the best for how we're using it. It's very good for APIs, but there are other frameworks that we could very easily do some pretty cool stuff with. So I don't know if Flask would replace PHP, but we can do some pretty cool stuff. But yeah, so that's a brief rundown. Let's see, what did we cover today? We covered Zapier, how we can get webhooks in a Flask application with this down here. Looks like it got changed at some point. Request. Oh yeah, we covered the Flask request. That's how we get information from a webhook. We covered, what else did we cover? Oh yeah, I need to research if there's still a WayScript library for Viz. Need to figure that out. We covered that it would be cool that a guide existed that would convert WayScript Viz to WayScript X functionality. And then we got into the WayScript library of WayScript X and how we can get user information. All very clever. Thank you. Hopefully it was fun. Hopefully, I know I got talking a long time about this. I do apologize. But hopefully it was insightful. Hopefully it was worthwhile. And I guess I'll jump off here. Thanks so much for tuning in. Sorry about the bannings. I felt powerful today. Got to ban 2 separate accounts. But all right, I guess I'll jump off here. Have a great afternoon. Take care, and I hope to see you next time.